Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our most recent installation of our Webinar Wednesday series. My name is Jamison Reynolds and I'm the Director of Marketing Strategy for the Library Corporation. Today's session is a little different from our previous sessions and I cannot begin to express how excited we are to bring this to you. Libraries in the time of COVID is certainly an interesting time, a time that none of us, I'm pretty sure, predicted a year ago. If you had predicted this a year ago, if you could tell me who's going to win the MLS's back tournament in Orlando next month, my credit card debt would really appreciate it. With me today are a few of TLC's customers that span both Library.Solution and CarlX. We have East Coast represented, Mid-Atlantic and Southern represented. We have the Midwest as well as the Pacific Northwest here as well. We are all in various stages of reopening. Some are already reopened, some are in the process of reopening. Everyone has had to close at some point, and when it comes to where everyone lives, COVID numbers are a little bit different as well. Some are decreasing, stable, and some are on the potential of an increased case count. These webinars have typically lasted a half hour. For this session, we stated 45 minutes. But to be honest, we have a hard cap set at an hour because we expect this conversation will probably take a little longer than usual. If you have any questions, please send them in. We will leave time at the end of this to try and answer as many questions as we can. With that, let me introduce the panel. If you all wouldn't mind, please share with us who you are, your library system and where it is located, and your role within the library. Gina, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Gina Emory, and I am the IT manager for the East Bonner County Library District, and we are in North Idaho. So we're not, Spokane's our big city, so to get a feel of where we are, yeah, that's who we are.
Awesome. Ty?
I am Ty Henderson. I am the director of the Champaign County Library in Ohio, and we are in the west central area of the state.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. Lynn?
I'm Lynn Hoffman. I'm Director of Operations at the Somerset County Library System of New Jersey, which means I'm responsible for everything related to technology and collections. And we're a 10-branch county library system.
Awesome. And Margaret?
And my title is System Services Librarian, which equates to I'm sort of the branch manager for everything that doesn't happen in a physical building. Similar to Lynn, it's a lot of technology and collection management.
Okay. And I'm sure with everyone's job title, everyone's responsibility stays completely focused within that swim lane of how we're defined, which is good. Before we get really started and kind of how we handle being closed and the reopening process, I don't want to say necessarily go through a TikTok, but if we can go back and actually talk about the time that led up to being closed. So let's follow that same order for this first question. So Gina, if you could get us started, tell me about your initial closure in the library. Were you given a lot of time to prepare for this? Was it kind of thrust upon you? How did your staff, from a personal standpoint, how did your staff handle the situation?
So we, the state, the governor came out, it was March 17th, I believe was the date. And that was when kind of the closures started. And we, I think the day before, we were told that this was going to happen. We were waiting for the governor's press conference, and literally at like noon on, I want to say it was the 18th, the trustees had met and said, we're closing, and staff was told, go home. So no notice, no nothing. It was just go home. So we really had less than a day notice that we were going to do that, and everybody had to go home. And then, you know, the department heads had to figure out how we were going to work, what we were going to do.
Gotcha. Ty?
We were starting to talk about the potential for closing on March 10th at our board meeting, kind of outlining the plans that we might take if that needed to be the case. And by that Friday, the 13th, we were already announcing that we were going to be closing, and ended up shifting to drive-up window service on March 17th. But by the 21st, we were closed as part of the statewide shut down. And then we went from there.
Wow. Lynn?
Ours is pretty much the same story as Ty's. Our executive team in the week leading up to March 16th had started to talk about, well, maybe we'll need to close. Oh yeah, we probably will need to close. Oh crap, we really need to close. So even the date as of which that closure happened shifted within that short period of time. And initially it was going to be the 23rd, and then it shifted back to the 16th. And then on Saturday, the 14th, we decided, nope, we're going to close tomorrow. So it was a lot of a moving target for sure.
Gotcha. Margaret?
Our situation was similar to Gina's. We were told first on March 17th that all of our county department offices would close on the 19th. Later that day, they changed it to the 18th. So we had about half a day to figure out how to transition to curbside service from the buildings being open. And then most people were sent to work from home who could. By April the 1st, our buildings were entirely closed, and we were offering no service at all.
I kind of want to zero in on something, Margaret, you just said, and kind of maybe put this out open to the group. You just said for those that could work from home, they could. Tell me about the challenge of having a remote workforce from a technological standpoint. Every entity is different, every company is different. I work for a technology company. That was, we have staff already that is used to working remotely. So although we had differences with going, dispersing and going home, I think we have less of a challenge than, let's say, you all would, where you are mostly, although you have online content, you are mostly focused physically as a team within a building. So actually, Lynn, let me start with you. Tell me about that. Tell me about how that was for you and your staff.
So I'm a little embarrassed to say that the stars aligned for us on that. We are a G Suite customer and have been for quite a long time. So Google Meet was already in our toolbox, although many of us had not used it before, and all of a sudden we're having all staff meetings with 275 people on them as a Google Meet thing. The other thing that really saved us was at the end of last year, we had purchased some new Chromebooks to replace our oldest public Chromebooks that we allow for use inside our buildings. And we hadn't deployed them yet. So we actually turned around and deployed those to staff so that they could take them home. Without that, we would have had a really, really difficult time, I think, making as much telework available as we were able to. We tried to keep as many people going as we possibly could, and I think we did a pretty good job of it. And so now we're at the point where we're having to shift gears and bring people back in.
Gotcha. Ty?
Yeah, we are a smaller staff. We had 20 staff members, and at the beginning, it was trying to figure out what kind of technology access everyone had at home. Who had internet connections? Could we utilize, the library hotspots to help with the staff? And then we are Office 365 group, and so we had, some of that suite of software that we were aware of, but hadn't really taken advantage of. And so, during that time, like, we really have, dove headfirst into Teams to kind of get staff on board and communicate that way, so that then moving out of, getting back to somewhat of a normal, we can continue using that to stay as engaged as we can.
Gotcha. Gina?
We're G Suite customers too, but we didn't use Google Meet. We actually just set up a Zoom account, and the department heads met via Zoom, and also with some of the board members, just to kind of, in the very beginning, figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? First of all, everybody's going to get paid. Don't worry about it. We have about 40 people on staff, and it was just like, it doesn't matter who you are. It's already budgeted for it. You're going to all get paid. And then going forward, what are we going to do? Well, we live in a really rural area and a lot of our staff do not have internet access. And so we had 10 hotspots that we were preparing to start circulating. So they got circulated to the staff, those who didn't have internet. And some of the so Gina was coming in and setting up a laptop and leaving it for someone to come and pick up. And so we had a few people that needed laptops. They didn't have their own computers. And so we just sort of dispersed equipment as needed so that we could all, stay in touch. We did do so we had 2 people retire during this. Normally you have a big retirement bash.
Right.
It was awful because we couldn't do that. We actually had a Zoom retirement party for all staff, as many as possible, for one of the people who was retiring. So we kind of dealt with those things too. But I had to also then, we had people who needed access to their computer because the accounting software is only on their computer. And we really had never set up like terminal services, remote desktop, whatever. We have a really great IT consulting firm who they're my people when it's over my head or something needs to happen right now, or I'm gone somewhere. And they stepped up. Of course, they were getting these requests from all their clients, but they stepped up immediately and set up the remote desktop server. They set up, the people who needed to actually access their real computer versus who just needed access to the network so they could get to their documents that were stored on the server, the ones that are not in Google Drive.
Right.
So a combination of all of those technologies. So it was definitely a lot of, running around sort of putting all the pieces together to make it all work. But it worked. And it's still working for some people that,
Right. And Margaret,
before I'm going to interrupt you, I want to say thank God we went to LS 5.5.x before this all started, because that made everything else, like one of our workers was home, she lives 35 miles away, but she was able to get on and do all of the patron maintenance, and double checking due dates and all that kind of stuff for people and card expirations. And, that we already had LS2 staff, but then with everything, it was just a godsend.
That's actually something I'd like to follow up on, if that's okay. And Margaret, it was your comment that got me kind of thinking of this tangent, and now I'm not going to give you a chance to answer this question because I'm actually going to pivot to something else. But before we do, one thing I do want to kind of make a note of for the attendees, that as we're going through this, there will be more polls, and we're actually doing polls to kind of get the feedback from everybody that's on this call. And what's really interesting is the poll that we just conducted regarding the amount of time that attendees on this call had to prepare to close. 32% of you said you had less than 1 day to prepare, and 52% of you had 1 to 3 days. So the idea that of all the attendees on this call, 80% or so, 85% had 3 days or less to prepare for a complete shutdown of their facility is absolutely mind-boggling to me. That this is how fast and how rapid the COVID-19 situation struck all of us. It's pretty amazing. But Gina, and this actually wasn't something I was planning on necessarily getting into, but Gina, you kind of brought it up, and you were mentioning 5.5. And Lynn, because you're on Carl, I am going to come back to you on this one a little bit. Margaret, since you started that last question, didn't get the answer, you're going to start us with this one, which is you are on the 5X generation of library.solution as well. So if you can, because of this whole situation with having to close down, especially as rapidly as you did, can you tell me what kind of role library.solution 5X played in the situation that you find yourself in right now?
Because we were on 5.5.2, we could do things for the public that we had not done before because we deployed the new version of the online borrower registration, which meant that we could register new borrowers and get them access to the digital resources while we were entirely closed. And we've registered almost 1,000 new borrowers in about 3 months through OBR. Because we had 5.5, we had a lot more productive jobs that we could give to a wider range of staff who were working from home. With LS2 cataloging, and not requiring speakers of MARC as a second, if not a first language, to use it meant that I could enlist various reference staff people who helped with projects like adding awards, checking series titles, that kind of thing, which meant they had something that felt useful to do, and we had something that was useful in terms of making the database better. So we were very, the timing worked out really well for us. What version
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I promise everyone on this call, I did not prompt or ask Margaret to say anything about LS2 cataloging there, but as the former product owner of that module, if there's a smirk on my face for the remainder of this webinar, that's exactly why I'm smirking. And in case anybody tunes in about a half hour from now. Ty, can you tell me a little bit about 5X and what kind of role it played with you being remote?
Yeah, and we were wanting to jump on 5.5 as soon as we could, and largely the flexibility of what it provides for doing things like off-site services, or being able to just work from anywhere on some of this, the processes behind the scenes with library services. But then it just was natural when we were shut down to have all of that access from everyone's home, to be able to jump in and work on something that needed to get done, so that library business could still continue along, even though we weren't able to have direct patron interactions. We were still able to do a lot of things for patrons and make a lot of adjustments within the system that we needed to on the fly, to make sure that we were giving the best service that we could under the circumstances.
Okay, and at this point, we've pretty much identified the fact that Margaret, Gina, and Ty are Library.Solution users on this roundtable. Lynn utilizes Carl. So if you could talk a little bit about your use of Carl during this time.
Sure, representing for Carl. So we migrated to Carl about 2.5 years ago, and one of the reasons we chose TLC and Carl is because of the Carl Connect staff product, which is a web-based interface for staff functions. We really wanted to launch with it and just do that, and it's under development, so it wasn't quite ready yet. And so we've been kind of chipping away at it bit by bit. I can't tell you how many people have said to me since we've been closed, oh my gosh, it's so good that we had Carl Connect staff, otherwise we would never have been able to do X. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, I know, that's the point. So having that tool at our fingertips was really, really helpful. I gotta say too, the other thing that I will give a shout out about, and for those attendees who are also Carl customers, this won't surprise you at all. The Denver office was amazing in reacting to all of the changes that we wanted to make. Some of the readjustments that we did were just settings changes that we could make ourselves, but some of them were things where we had a question like, can it do this? And we asked it, and the Carl team was really responsive to that. So for instance, we did a curbside pickup that we called hands-free holds, and used scheduling software to have people make an appointment for a 10-minute window to come and pick up their stuff. So we had a different kind of landing site for each of our branches, and we couldn't figure out how to get that into the hold notice. So we put a ticket in and said, hey, is there any way we can do this? And they said, well, we can't right now, but we have this other thing that's in the works, and we could just modify it and turn it into a patch. And really, literally 4 days later, we had that feature in our hands, and we're able to incorporate that in our notices. So huge props to the Denver office.
That's awesome. And honestly, if you saw the poll that was just on your screen, and I was worried that my team that's doing these polls was going to say, oh, Jamison's going rogue because we're going out of order for what we were going to talk about. But honestly, later I was going to ask a question, and Lynn, you kind of just seamlessly went into it. So Ty, if I can jump to you, I mean, kind of piggybacking on what Lynn was saying, with your current ILS settings, were you able to get through closure with your settings as is, or did you have to change rules or make modifications to how you had your system structured?
For the most part, we did everything as is. We did support. We reached out to support for things like extending the due dates, turning off email notifications. but otherwise we're able to, jump in and make some other modifications just through preferences or, changing the opening calendar. So we're able to kind of do most of the stuff as is, and then from there is more of just relaxing a lot of the rules that we had in place procedures wise.
Gotcha. Gina?
Yeah, again, LS, 5X was awesome because I at home can do preferences and access everything I needed to do. So basically turned off all the fines on everything. And during the process of this, our board actually agreed to go fine free. So I got to keep them turned off. I didn't have to go back and turn them back on again.
Nice.
So is that going to remain policy once everything is back up and running? You are now officially a fine-free library?
Yeah,
That's
we've been
awesome.
trying to get the board to do that for 2 years, and they never would. And this just sort of, was the hammer and the nail in the coffin, whatever. But yeah, TLC did extend the due dates for us, and then the rest was us going through and just me going through basically and dealing with changing the rules like everybody had to do, so that patrons were still able to use your digital materials, because of course, overdue items, expired cards, etc., that was a problem. So, but TLC was so like right there, to just, our due dates got extended right now. Like how, how far do you want them to go? And also I love the fact that TLC provided that sort of checklist of, here's the things you might want to think about doing if you're closing. And that was like, oh gosh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, let's do that. So turning off email notifications and things like that. So super, super helpful. Super helpful.
Gotcha. And I probably should say that at my reaction to you saying you've gone fine free is totally Jamison Reynolds' opinion and not necessarily the Library Corporation. And if you want to be a finding or non-finding library, we can support you in either one of your policy decisions. That was totally Jamison. Margaret, how about you all? How was your settings?
Well, the royal we made what felt to me at the time, at least, like a fair amount of changes. I created a couple of new circulation rules and moved everything we were circulating to one of two simplified and extended circulation rules, which extended basic due dates. We turned on auto renewal, which was another thing that we hadn't had until 5.5. And after that, it was a rolling case of finding out what wasn't working quite right and doing the best we could to fix it. Without what TLC support did, we probably couldn't have done it at all. They were a great help. But yeah, I ended up with a 2.5-page document of every setting that I had changed, so I had a record of it and could start to reconstruct it as we began to open back up again.
Gotcha. We have had, before I go on to my next question, we've had two things come in and we can address. First, I'll address myself. A question came in from someone that is still Library Doc Solution 4.2, and the question was, what are the major differences between 4X and 5X? And to answer that question, I promise you, we will do a webinar in the month of July on an overview of what 5X looks like. There is probably, I think the panel would say, even Lynn, who's not using LS, there's probably a lot of differences between 4 and 5 for us to be able to accommodate into answering in this webinar. So I will do a separate webinar just to answer that question in the future. Another question we got was from the audience. It came from an academic library who does interlibrary loan. Our challenge was to provide material to our patrons without being able to borrow or loan books. How have you all handled this at your institutions? Lynn, can we start with you?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So we are a big net lender at our library and have a pretty significant interlibrary loan operation. That was complicated tremendously by the fact that the interlibrary delivery in the state of New Jersey that's funded through the state library also shut down at this time. So even if we wanted to borrow things or lend things, we would have had a tough time. What we ended up doing on a kind of case-by-case basis was work with our reference librarians who were staffing our virtual reference services and have them let us know, is there something that someone really, really needs really, really badly, and we'll kind of make a special request for it and have it just sent to us, mailed to us. But we didn't do very many of those. People have been really patient. So we're looking forward to ramping that back up once that interstate delivery stuff gets going.
Gotcha. Gina?
Well, other libraries are closed. Can't get books from libraries that are closed. So we didn't do any interlibrary loan at all until we started opening up again. Probably maybe a little over a month and a half ago. I'm trying to remember when we opened. I think it was mid-May-ish. We started opening on a very limited basis, and we started to do some ILL stuff then. But yeah, otherwise what we would try to do, kind of what Lynn was saying, the reference librarians, we would try to direct people toward digital resources, a database. Maybe we could find what they need, through our databases or something like that. That was kind of the only option that we had. So, because no books from anybody. So, yeah.
Margaret, any interlibrary loan in North Carolina?
We stopped interlibrary loan when we went to Curbside the first time, and we've just started back doing it this week. In the interval, we didn't try because, as Gina said, the assumption was practically any library was closed, and we didn't expect to be able to get something even if we requested it. There were a few instances in which we purchased ebooks that we might not have purchased ordinarily in order to be able to fill a need that otherwise we would have tried to do by interlibrary.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Same here.
Ty?
Yeah, our statewide system was shut down, and it's only recently started back up. So now they're working through the backlog of everything they couldn't deliver in March. So we were just kind of conveying to people that everyone else was shut down and things weren't being shipped between libraries anyway, but then also conveying to them at this point that it's still going to be a while before all of those holds start to get filled.
Mm-hmm.
Ty, let's actually stay with you on this next one. Let's talk about actually reopening. Let's talk about the process of reopening. So we're all closed, we're all remote-ish. Time that goes into constructing a reopening plan. Did it take you a long time? Did it feel rushed? Talk me through your reopening planning.
Right, and
itself.
Overall, I didn't feel rushed because, as soon as we, shut down, I was already starting to think, at some point we're going to have to reopen and how we would, start to think about that. So it felt like I probably had 2 weeks starting around the middle of April when, you start thinking about, okay, when they start lifting kind of the state restrictions that they had in place to allow employees back into the building. I knew we'd be able to have a plan to get the staff into the building, and then from there, continue to stay closed to the public for a while to get everything in place as far as safety measures going on. But it gave us some time to then establish the curbside procedures, work out the process that we're going to do for that. So it was really nice being able to get the staff into the building and then actually kind of work through some of the actual logistics without having to deal with any of the patrons in the building. So overall, it didn't feel rushed, but it was still nice to be able to just kind of work with the staff to get all of those logistics in place.
Did any of you feel like you could have used more time to putting a plan together? Lynn, you're nodding your head. Tell me about your feelings on constructing a plan.
So, I mean, like Ty, we really started thinking about reopening as soon as we closed. and had some really high level plans in place about, what happens after we hear from the governor's office that libraries are able to reopen. How are we going to handle returns? All of that kind of stuff. We talked it through. But what we knew and what has transpired is that the amount of time between when that reopening announcement happened and when we would be expected by our governing board, our stakeholders, our public to actually be open again is way shorter than I would have liked it to be. We are in New Jersey, our public libraries in general are able to open to 25% capacity starting tomorrow. We got that news last Thursday. So we all of a sudden had to pivot and do a whole lot of kind of press and outreach to patrons. We had to, cook up schedules real quick, like all of that kind of stuff. And we're actually not opening tomorrow. We're since we're going to be closed Friday and Saturday anyway for Independence Day, we figured why open for a day and then go home for the weekend. So our reopening is slated for Monday, and it feels really fast. I think part of the challenge is that from an administrative level, we've been thinking about this for months, but we haven't had enough concrete information to share with staff to make them feel like they've been in on that whole conversation for months. So I think they feel a lot more rushed. And as a result, I think we're feeling that. And it's a high stress level leading up to Monday. So.
Gotcha. And Lynn, if we can stay with you a little bit, because, we're talking about the different phases of opening. And, we're already talking about how you're at 25%, allowed to be 25% capacity. Let's step back a little bit, because I'm going to guess that there are probably still libraries that are on this that may not yet have opened up to the public, or there may be even school libraries that are trying to figure out how they're going to handle that. Talk to me about your baby step. Let's talk about the baby steps
Sure.
that have kind of gotten into you. So what was, when you first decided to dip your toe in the water, what was it that Somerset did?
Yeah, the first thing that we did was our hands-free holds service, which is curbside pickup, except that instead of staff members bringing material out to a person's vehicle, they would tell us when they were coming. We'd check it out for them ahead of time and put it on a table right outside the door. So hands-free holds, woohoo! We started that back, I think at the beginning of end of April, and our first priority was to clear the items that were currently sitting on our hold shelves as of when we closed in March, to kind of ramp up and see how that was going to work and figure out what the logistics of it would be. We started just at one location, we expanded it to a couple more. We're really only doing it at all of our locations as of a couple weeks ago. So it's been a long spread out process. And it's really just this week that we kind of changed our approach. We had previously been, after we cleared the whole shelves, we tried to pull things that were on hold to be picked up at the branch where the item was already located, because our inter-branch delivery hadn't kind of ramped up yet and we didn't want to overload them. So we wanted to ease into it slowly. And it's just this week that we've kind of opened up fill list and had a whole no holds barred kind of approach to filling holds. Although we have been trying really hard to work from oldest hold to newest, we have a great deal of sensitivity to fairness among our patrons. So we want to make sure that we handle things first in, first out.
Gotcha. Gina?
So we started offering curbside holds probably, I can't remember the exact date, but sometime mid-April. And same thing, we do contactless. We would check this stuff out, but we use an app called You Can Book Me. So that people could schedule their hold. At first, we were calling people and scheduling everything,
yep,
and putting it on a Google spreadsheet. And then we were like, let's offer, the You Can Book Me. They can pick their time slot, and people who don't have that, access to the internet can call us still. But that eliminated.
Yep.
And then when they drove up, there was a sign out there that said, "Call us and let us know you're here." And so then we would just leave it on we have a little bench out front. We left it on the bench for them. So we did that. And that's, curbside holds are going to probably continue for a while, because a lot of people still don't want to come in, even though we're open. So Idaho, we never had like mandates that it's Idaho. It's a lot more lenient. Plus, we don't have that many cases here. Like I said earlier, we've only had a total of 29 in our county, and right now there's only like 10 that are active. No deaths, 1 hospitalization. So, but anyway, it's
Yeah,
Idaho.
and our
So,
story, not to interrupt you, but our story is totally different in New Jersey. I
right.
mean, we have approaching 5,000 cases at this point in Somerset
Although
County,
it's
and that's
funny
not
is
even the highest. So
NPR puts Idaho, we're at the top for the percentage increase because we had 682% increase, but that's still only a total of 226 new cases.
Right.
there you go.
But anyway, so we shut down. We did stage 1 for 2 weeks. So we had time to plan. We met, the department heads met via Zoom every week. And then our director every single day sent out an email to the staff saying
Wow.
something usually uplifting and encouraging. And then had people check in that way. They were required to check in via email. I'm here, here's what I'm doing, blah, 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 whatever. All of our staff were assigned training to do. So it was a great opportunity for that. So we had lots of online training. So the part-timers had 10 hours a week of training they were required to do. And then the full-timers were supposed to do 20. So we did have time to plan, and we have stages that we did everything in, and dates and everything else. So I felt like it wasn't as bad as far as, feeling like we didn't know where we were going. Once we all kind of sat down and went through we followed the Idaho Rebounds date plans. And then we talked a lot about how to, provide service to our patrons, digital, whatever it was, curbside pickups and everything else. And then when we started opening to the public on a very limited basis, we put 2 computers in the lobby so that people could access those computers. They were separated, and they could call ahead and reserve a computer. And we did that like 3 days a week. We were doing those computers in the lobby before we let anybody in the building, inside the main part of the library. So it was just Curbside Holds and these 2 computers that were available. So, and then we had 2 weeks of just being open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and Saturday, part day. Mm-hmm. And then as of Monday, we are open all of our hours. So doing all that stuff.
Gotcha. After Gina's update there, I'm not sure if I can predict that tlcdelivers.com traffic will go up, but I have a feeling that at least one realty company's website traffic is going to go up with people looking up moving options into Idaho with numbers like that. That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
Margaret, let's talk about baby steps at New Hanover.
Well, what happened in New Hanover, we went in mid-March to curbside for about a week and a half, had just about figured that out when that was shut down by our county government. And while we were all working from home, there were a number of staff meetings, planning discussions, and so forth. In terms of really formal planning, we knew that we would go back to curbside service when the governor's office announced a date to move from phase 1 to phase 2 of the reopening plan. So we had a couple of weeks when we pretty certainly knew when that was going to be, and in the week before that we were allowed to have some staff back into the library buildings to start. Mm-hmm. As of now, we are still offering only curbside service. We don't anticipate having people into the library buildings until such time as the state reaches phase 3. And given that right now the indicators are basically all trending in the wrong direction, we're not sure when that will happen yet. Right. At least 3 weeks from now. Right.
So Margaret is not yet open to inside services. Lynn, Monday starts. Gina, you're there already. Ty, tell me about your situation with Baby Steps introducing services. Tell me about some of your experiences you've had with offering services, and then where you all are as far as indoor services at this point.
Sure. We were allowed, the state mandate was lifted May 4th when staff could start to get into the building. And we spent 2 weeks at that point moving some things into our meeting room, which we had used in previous years as kind of like a triage location during renovations, which is another great shout out for 5X being able to just be flexible to do that without having to bring in installs on individual computers. But then May 18th, we started our curbside service, and as we were leading up to it, we were going straight off of the Kroger grocery store model of get your holds placed into your trunk after you call us, let us know that you're there. So patron familiarity was already there with that, and so having the little triage in the meeting room then allowed us to have a circ pod and a tech services pod throughout the rest of the building, so that we had a way of kind of separating staff as another safety barrier kind of thing that we were doing. And then we reopened last Monday, June 22nd, and limited the access within the building. We put all the seating away. We're allowing only 25 in the store, but we have a very large footprint of the building. It's an old converted grocery store, so space is something that we're fortunate to have, but limited the number of public computers to allow for some spacing there. And we even put some tape on the floor of that computer lab so that patrons can see kind of where that 6-foot mark is, that staff isn't going to be coming beyond. And from there, now it's been kind of seeing how that has gone, and it has gone far better than I was expecting when we opened our doors to the public. A lot of people were coming in already masked, and we had some masks and hand sanitizer, so people who weren't masked, a lot of them were just grabbing masks there at the door. So that part of that patron behavior was really reassuring to staff in particular who were having any anxieties about coming out. So it was something too that the governor has been good as far as having all of these press conferences to kind of announce decisions that are coming down the road, so you can see where their thinking is and kind of plan accordingly. And so we did a lot of staff meetings that way to kind of say, this is what's coming from the state, this is what we're likely to do. So as far as just baby steps of just communicating with staff helped getting people back into the building as well.
Library life is, in the time of COVID, has been nothing but a series of curveballs. I think we can all agree to that. Ty, I have to say, your library got thrown an incredibly difficult curveball. Can you tell us about what happened to your library?
Correct. And something that I keep coming back to is, like there's never a perfect time to implement something, and being able to be flexible and rolling with the the punches. So the meeting room that we're doing all of this curbside service through is up towards the front of the building, and we had an incident about just under 2 weeks ago, about a week and a half. We had a suspected drunk driver come through the building into that meeting room location. So, thankfully, everyone was safe. So it's much easier to, have some levity about it, but it's like, everyone interprets curbside differently. And, this guy took out, our main curbside location. So
Wow.
on top of needing to then transition curbside somewhere else, we were already looking, this happened on a Wednesday, and we were already looking at reopening to the public on Monday. So we took Thursday, Friday, and a bit of that Saturday, major kudos to my staff for the flexibility that they showed, because there was a couple of days where we were writing the new, job descriptions literally by the hour. Lunchtime would be different than what it was when we started. But it was, you never know, what's going to happen. But we knew that we were going to have to move that curbside service out of the meeting room anyway once we reopened. So we're already kind of thinking, but it just talk about, not having enough time to prepare for that. It compressed us, right down to the, the hour,
Wow.
Right.
so that we could reopen.
Ty, I have to say, there is absolutely nothing funny about suspected drunk driving or the potential catastrophe that you almost faced and the damage to your building. But your phrase of everyone interprets curbside differently sounds like a great TLCU title for some session in the future. I just want to call dibs on that right now for you, for some session someday. That's wild. That's absolutely wild. I think we can go a little bit rapid fire a little bit for the next ones. Someone sent in, an attendee sent this in, and we can go really quick with this. How long are your returned materials being quarantined for? So Lynn, let's start with you.
It'll be 72 hours.
Okay, Margaret?
We're saying 3 days. It's a full 3 days from the closing. So if something comes on Monday, it will get checked in on Friday.
Gotcha.
Okay, Gina?
48 hours.
48 hours. Ty?
We started off at 72.
We're at 72 hours.
Okay. Let me go back to another attendee question, because we were talking about this, and again, with Ty's, everyone interprets curbside differently. When you do reopen to inside services, will you still allow for curbside services for those that request it? I'm seeing Ty nodding, Gina nodding, Lynn?
Almost. The model that we're using, where we have the stuff sort of out sitting for someone to come and pick it up, is not going to work very well with patron traffic also coming through the front doors. So we're going to put a pin in it for a little bit, but we have some other options that we're going to look at to do something more like the retail and fast food and stuff.
Okay, Margaret?
We expect there will be some accommodation for people who don't want to come into the buildings. We don't know yet exactly how that would work.
Okay. I've got social distance on the brain here, as does a couple of attendees. When you do reopen, what are your protocols for assisting patrons finding books, using pack stations, things of that nature? Is it really self-service, or are there protocols in place for you to help borrowers? Ty, let's start with you.
We've actually added, we essentially just turned our scanners around so that patrons can scan their own barcodes and materials, because we don't have self-checkout station per se, but we've shifted to doing that. We don't really assist people in the packs or in the stacks, other than reference librarians taking them back there, getting them started. But it's reinforcing to the staff more than anyone else that we're keeping that 6-foot distance. The public computers has been the greatest challenge. We put in some software to be able to kind of remotely help them at their stations, but we still have those people who are coming in who need a little more hands-on help. But still encouraging that 6 feet is the closest we're going to be coming. And that's been a definite challenge.
Yeah.
Gina?
Yeah, we have, so we put the plexiglass up everywhere, and we've got the feet on the ground that show people where 6 foot is. The same thing, we've got net support, so I'm able to remotely, assist people. And that's the majority of what I do. But I was working tech desk the other day, and I had to help some people that just couldn't figure out our new printing. And it's just impossible to do that from 6 feet away. You can point, do whatever.
Right.
And so we do have a little sign that says sanitized, not sanitized. So when somebody sits down, we ask them to turn that sign around and say not sanitized. And so that as soon as they get up, we'll go over and sanitize everything, then turn the sign back around that says sanitized.
Nice.
That's a great idea.
There are times when you just have to be closer than 6 feet, and you try to limit that to a very short period of time, and then, you sanitize everything that you can. But we're all masked up, gloved up if you're touching stuff. I try to just point a lot, and some people just can't get it, but we're doing our best to maintain that distance.
Yeah.
If I may, just this might make it a little easier with a show of hands real quick. Are any of you in libraries where face masks are mandatory to enter the building? Okay. I'm curious for your staff, and I'm not trying to, I don't know, I'm not trying to put anybody in a bad spot here. You might know where I'm going with this. Where have your staff been trained or given protocols on how to handle when you have a borrower that refuses to put one on, thus trying to avoid joining the collaboration of videos that you see on the nightly news or YouTube? Right.
So
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Gina. Go ahead.
I was going to pipe up because I'm in Idaho. People don't like to be told what to do. And, it's made national news all about our open carry gun thing here at our festival. So we knew we were going to face backlash from people, that are like, I pay for this library, I'm coming in, I'm not wearing a mask. We have one employee he's extremely soft-spoken, but very firm. And he was the person who, during our, slow opening, was at the door greeting everybody, explaining to them about the mask. Here's a mask if you don't have one. Here's a hand sanitizer, all that kind of stuff. He only met with a couple people who gave him flack. And our response to that is, we're happy to bring you whatever it is you want out to you. So tell us what you want. We'll go get it. So we're not denying you service. You can't say that, except for they can't come in, of course, and use the computers, but that they have to. One lady was really, really angry. So my boss actually contacted, she tried to contact the Attorney General's office. They didn't get back to her, but ICRIMP, which is our risk management people, to say, can we legally, as a public agency, require masks? And he did say, yes, you can. So at that point, we've gotten some bad press on, Facebook, people complaining about it, because this area is full of people who don't want to wear masks, and I will confess, if it's not required, I don't wear one. When I go to Walmart or whatever, I don't wear it, but I wear one at work. I have to. When it's required, I do. When it's not, I don't. But so there's a lot of people, that mentality. So that's something that we really, really were worried about, that challenge. But so far, it's just been a few troublemakers.
Yeah.
We predicted.
Yeah, and I think the culture of our communities is really driving some of that too. I mean, we're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. In New Jersey, we had a huge hit early on, and it was clear to everybody that we needed to do something about it. We tend to be less sort of ruggedly individualistic here in New Jersey. And so in supermarkets and other places, for the most part, people are complying. It's great to be able to say, it's the state order that requires you to wear a mask to come in, so that's fine. And then we've talked to staff about, if people don't really push back on wearing a mask, you have a couple of options at your discretion from a customer service standpoint. If it makes sense to just kind of let it go, then do that. But it's also just like a behavior issue, like any other behavior issue. If it's disruptive to other patrons or to our ability to our job, then we're going to follow the same protocols that we do with behavior. I know there was another question back in the Q&A about whether we got guidance from the state specifically about libraries. And in New Jersey, we're very fortunate that we did, both in terms of closing and in terms of reopening. It's incredibly specific. We happen to have on the governor's staff at a high level, someone who also happens to be on the board of a public library here in New Jersey. So we think we have kind of a back channel in there. So I think we've been in really good shape that way. We're really fortunate.
Okay. One of my coworkers was very just messaged me to let me know that we are really coming up on 4 o'clock. So I'm going to try and be a little bit quicker here. And if we go to 4:01 or 4:02, we're probably going to go to 4:05, but we're really going to do what we can to get through this. I'm just really curious. I don't want to be a pessimist, but do you all have plans in place if we are to have to close again? You know what your protocols are, or are we operating as if that was a one-time deal?
Yeah, We just met about that today. Actually, our department head meeting today, that's what we talked about is we need to be prepared and have our plan for if we have to close again, because granted, you know, we only have X number of cases here, but we are at 682% increase. So,
Right.
you know, who knows where things are going to go. And so, yes, we actually are just put together a plan, you know, starting today, we're collaborating on that.
Gotcha. Margaret?
We, not having entirely opened up yet, we haven't really discussed specifics of drawing back, but we have a lot of notes as to what we did the last time, and I just hope we'll have a little bit more time to implement if we have to do that again.
Yeah, gotcha. Ty?
Yeah, and you know, I'm expecting us not to actually close necessarily. I think it's more of, you know, do we potentially roll some things back, you know, take the baby steps back, but more than anything, you know, for me, I'm thinking of what are we going to do when we have a staff member, you know, who contracts COVID, and
Sure.
depending on that person, you know, how that then affects, you know, everything else. That's more of what the direction I'm thinking.
And Lynn?
Yeah, we don't have a plan all spelled out from A to Z, but we've definitely talked about it, both in terms of logistics, like how we would handle making all the circ changes the next time. There were some things that kind of slipped through the cracks for a couple of weeks, and then we realized and had to follow up with something. So now we know what those are. But we also have been kind of keeping track of what ways of communicating with our patrons have been more effective than others. So like we know that being really specific when we send out an email about returns saying, please don't bring your stuff back until it's actually due, to be able to target just the people who actively have checkouts right now is a different story from just doing a blanket kind of email blast to all of our patrons. So.
Gotcha. My last prepared question, and again, we could try to be brief. If you want to expand on this, you can. And Gina, we'll start with you. If you could do this over again, other than not have to deal with COVID-19, as I see that I read my question, I'm like that. Well, let's not deal with a pandemic. Other than that, if you could do this over again, what would you do differently?
I knew you were going to ask that question. Probably start the curbside pickup maybe a little bit sooner. I felt like we shut down completely without staff even working for too long. So again, if you had to do it over, and hopefully we have a plan, you allow your staff to continue to work right away, you get that productivity out of staff. And I think that's a big factor, because that whole, you know, everybody's home and they're off having a vacation, and my boss is freaking out that we're paying people to be on vacation and no one has to use leave. Yeah. So feeling like you're being a better steward of the public's money by having people be productive. So that probably would be the biggest thing, making sure you have a plan in place for staff to continue to be productive right from the start.
Okay. Ty?
That is exactly what, you know, I would want to be able to do over again, is just be able to have more things in place for staff to be able to work on remotely to further things along.
Margaret?
Mainly, I would just hope to have a little bit longer lead time to put things into place before we shut down. Some of the setting changes we made weren't made far enough ahead of the point when we entirely shut to fully take effect. And so there's a lot of mopping up to go back and do that I would hope not to do again.
Okay. And Lynn?
I agree with Gina and Ty on staffing. I know that if we had known in March that we were going to be closed for going on 4 months, we would not have done staffing the way that we did it. And I'm glad we were able to, but it's not sustainable. The other thing though, I feel like this has given us an opportunity to really rethink the way we communicate with staff. So I mentioned earlier that we have Google Meet all staff meetings with over 250 people on them. Like, we didn't have all staff meetings before because it's hard to have 250 people all be kind of in the same place at the same time. So we know that we've uncovered some new channels that have really been helpful and that we'll continue to use in the future.
Gotcha. We got a comment and a question in. Let me go ahead and read the question. How many of your libraries increased your virtual libraries?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Substantially more than you would have expected in January?
For sure.
Okay. Have you noticed good utilization of the virtual collections increasing?
Absolutely.
We added some virtual collections we didn't have before, we wouldn't have bought before. So we added some of those resources, and the usage is insane. I mean, now we're getting comments from patrons going, oh my gosh, Libby's awesome.
Right.
Oh my gosh, Hoopla, you know, all these things that you've been trying so hard to get people to use, and nobody was using it. And now it's like, oh, yeah, cool. So yeah, our stats have gone way up.
And I will say we did get a comment in from an attendee. This was from an attendee. I've heard and felt myself the TLC support staff were totally on spot to get the job done. Internally, did you all recognize your responsiveness and effectiveness during COVID-19 as a mission? Absolutely. Our support team has been top notch. And I know this is framed from the support standpoint. Everyone within the organization has been completely impressed with the work that support has done in maintaining the seamlessness of attacking issues that came as because of this. Our support team really went, you know, it's hard for me. I'm going to wax poetic here, and I'm trying not to. But really, from going and dealing with support issues or potential issues within software not working, there really is almost a consultant level that becomes with this job when you're like, my rules need to change. How do I do this? How do I modify my permissions within preferences, which is LS? And then how do I change my admin console, you know, within Carl? There's all these elements that support takes on with this. And, you know, our phrase within support is we provide an outstanding and unexpected level of service. Our reputation within the industry has always been we have a very good support team. And kudos to the team, honestly, for myself, the other, everyone else, they've been recognized. And I will say from a communication standpoint within the company no longer, I shouldn't say no longer, because of this, we all had to evolve. So we're utilizing communication channels and e-channels and G Suite and things along these lines. One thing we've really words in the time of COVID, we can just make up whatever we want. But we really ensure that we're doing everything we can for all the teams and all the departments to be aware of what's happening. So our weekly all hands meetings are literally every employee in the company, regardless of team, regardless of office, going through and giving updates and protocols. And everybody is well aware of what everyone else is doing. So as much of a curveball that COVID threw all of us, you know, you all have talked about the takeaways from this that have actually been beneficial long-term. And we've gotten a lot of long-term benefits from that. So yes, support is well aware, the company is well aware. And I do appreciate that comment, whoever sent that in. That's really good. And we are at 4:04, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up now if that's okay. Thank you all for attending today's session. I have a slightly different send-off to this session than I typically do. I typically end these sessions with something along the lines of stay safe, stay healthy, and keep washing your hands, which I all think we can all agree that should have been something we were already doing prior to COVID. And it shouldn't have taken COVID for us to think about how much we don't wash our hands. But that's a little bit different. Today's send-off is different because we are making a modification to the webinar series. After this session, we are going to be taking a short break from this series. We will be back, but not with a weekly series. TLC has a lot of exciting opportunities and things coming down the pike. Myself and the rest of the marketing team want to make sure that you know about all of them. COVID isn't slowing down these libraries, as this webinar is a testament to, and it's not slowing down us at TLC either. Our client services team, as we were just talking about, is busy assisting libraries with their reopening plans as opposed to closing. We've made that pivot. We're doing reopening. And for our school districts, our school customers, we're getting ready for back to school as well, which is a major undertaking for our client services division. Implementation teams are currently getting new customers installed. So while this has been happening, we've been installing new customers and bringing new customers into the TLC family. Development teams have 2 major updates coming out for both Library.Solution and Carl within the next few weeks. And this is a really exciting moment for our company. TLC is moving, and I don't know if we've mentioned this outside of internal before. TLC is moving all of our co-location hosted environments into the Oracle Cloud.
Yep.
That means that not only is Carl moving into Oracle Cloud, Library.Solution is going to be moving into Oracle Cloud, and all of our development environments as well. We are doing a full move into that, and we are incredibly excited about that here at TLC, and I get to be the one who tells everybody on this webinar, and there's going to be plenty of information coming out about that in the future. This is a busy time for TLC, and we in marketing are looking forward to bringing all this upcoming news and announcements to you via additional webinars, videos, blog posts, press releases, social media, you name it, it's going to be coming at you. So please, if you don't already follow us on social media, please follow us on social media. Highly recommend that. And don't forget about tlcdelivers.com. If you're looking for more information about us, go ahead and go to our website, or our email address is info@tlcdelivers.com. We can go ahead and get you information that way as well. Thank you all for attending our session. Thank you so much, panelists, for the work that you did on this. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Everyone, please have a wonderful rest of the day. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we will see you from an appropriate social distance in the future. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Happy 4th.
Happy 4th.